Trouble River by Betsy Byers, Chapter 10, The Last Stop. He looked for his oar, but it had been swept overboard in the rapids. He thrust his foot over the side of the raft and began pedaling it through the water. "Grandma, we're at Hunter City," he cried again. "Yonder's Big River. We made it. And me looking like a scalded chicken," she said faintly. She moved her hands over her dress, fluttering, straightening, the soaked collar, pulling the wet skirt from her legs, squeezing the water from it. "Let's get over there, boy." "Yes'm." The raft moved closer to the shore. Dewey could see the white canvas-covered wagons in the clearing. "Help! Help! Somebody please help us!" Two men appeared on the bank. They looked up, saw the raft with its bedraggled occupants, and stared for a moment in amazement. Then one man ran to the wagons and returned with a length of rope. As the raft approached, he threw one end to Dewey. The raft was out of the current now and moving slowly. Dewey stepped around Grandma's chair. He had plenty of time to catch the rope. "We'll pull you in," the one man shouted. "Hold on." "I've got it," Dewey shouted. "You men don't go yanking it out of the boys' hands," Grandma said from her chair. She pointed her cane at the two men on the shore. "They won't, Grandma." "Well, I didn't shoot them rapids to go on no further. Them men yanked the rope too hard. You and me is likely to keep going to the Pacific." Dewey braced his foot against one log and then realized that the log was only held by a thread of hide. He stepped back just as the log broke away and moved slowly down the river. "Hurry, boy," Grandma said. "This thing's gonna go to pieces." With her foot, she nudged one of the few remaining logs of the loose flooring. "I know it." He pulled the rope arm over arm, and the raft moved toward shore. From the wagon camp came a stream of children, two freckled women with cooking utensils still in their hands, a buxom girl with a baby on her hip, and men in dusty mended clothing. They stood back, watching in silence as the raft bumped against the soft, wet earth. The taller man reached out his hand, and Dewey clasped it. The feel of the strong hand filled Dewey with relief that was complete and deep. Quickly, Charlie slipped it between them, stepping onto shore, and began to roll over and over in the dry grass. "You have to help my grandma," Dewey said. He continued to hold the man's hand to steady the raft. "Don't worry, you worry, son. We'll get her off." The other man stepped behind him. "One moment, young man," Grandma said. She opened her velour satchel, reached into the wet folds, and withdrew the gold-rimmed spectacles. "Grandma, hurry! This raft ain't gonna last you much longer," the man warned. Carefully, Grandma fastened the slender gold hooks behind her ears. Then she looked up at the man through her watery glass discs. "Now, young man, you can help me off this here raft." She stood with difficulty and took the man's hand. Clutching him for support, she moved to the edge of the raft, gasped as it dipped into the water, and then stepped onto the shore. "Ah," she said as she felt the earth firm and good beneath her trembling legs. She was weak, drained of her small strength by the long and difficult trip. "I'll set a minute," she said. She sank to the ground and then straightened. "Why don't you get my chair?" she said, pointing at it with her cane. "I'll get it." The man lifted the chair and jumped to shore. "Get off, son," he said. "It's breaking up." Dewey jumped and landed flatly on the bank, leaving perfect imprints of his bare feet in the mud. Then he turned and looked back at the Rosy Bee. Released by the men, it moved slowly down the river. The logs began to spread out like fingers on a hand, and then the last of the hide strips snapped and the logs moved apart. Behind him, Grandma said, "Are the Martins here? Would you know? A man and a woman from upriver?" "The Martins," he said thoughtfully. Dewey looked up at the man. "They'd be staying with the Sayers," he said. "Mr. Sayers keeps the store." He stopped. Then he added, "My ma's a real pretty woman who was going to have a baby." The man paused, scratching the stubble on his chin. "Seems like I did see them folks in town. Two chestnut horses, wasn't it? One was chestnut and the other black. A big black horse, Broad." Dewey pressed forward eagerly. "The broadest horse you ever saw." Behind the glasses, Grandma's eyes were sharp. "Speak up, man. Did you see them or didn't you?" She waited, her cane held tightly against her, while Dewey closed his eyes. In his mind, he could see again the disaster of the Dargan cabin, smell the tang of smoke. "I think I seen them folks," the short man said. "The man was settling up that black horse just as I was coming out of town. There's Indian trouble, and he was eager to get started home. And the woman, she was all for going right along with him, even though she just had a baby no bigger than that." "Praise the Lord," Grandma said. "They're here, and they're all right." Yes'm. Dewey was suddenly so weak with relief that he feared he would fall to the ground beside his grandma. His father and mother were safe. There's been folks killed and burned out all up and down this side of the valley, the short man continued. A man rode in this morning with the news. Indians just come down from the hills with no warning. The Wicks, the Dargans is all dead. Coburn's burned out. The Lovells got warning and got away, but their place was burned. Them Martins you was asking about was burned out. The Martins' cabin was burned, she asked. Yes'm, there ain't a cabin left that I know of. Grandma looked at Dewey without speaking. The man continued rapidly. And it wasn't but just 7 Indians that did it. They was caught last night. But it won't do them folks no good. No, nobody's done no good by doing things like that. She sighed. Fine folks gone. Fine places gone. She shook her head and jabbed her cane into the soft earth. Help me up and take me to the Martins. You folks part of the Martin family? Yes, this here's the son and I'm the grandma. That man up there saddling his horse is going back up to the valley to look for us, I reckon. I'll catch him. The short man took the bank in a single leap and ran off through the brush.